Welcome back to Photography Discourse. Today I want to talk about Nikon and their recent strategy of releasing the telephoto lenses. And there's been some question out there as to why they've released so many telephoto lenses when there's so much other stuff to be released. So I want to give my educated opinion today on why Nikon might be having a release schedule such as this, both for this year, how they've done their releases since the release of Z9, and how that will translate into next year as well. For those of you that are new to this channel or haven't seen me before and are wondering why my opinion might be relevant, I would refer you to the first two videos on my channel where I kind of explain that. But we'll just jump right in for now. In 2022, Nikon brought out 5 top-level S-line telephoto lenses. The 100 to 400 S lens, the 400 2.8 TC S lens, the 800 6.3 PF S lens, and the 400 4.5 S lens, as well as the most recently, and just last week I believe, the 600 f4 TC S lens. However, the only camera body that they've released in 2022 is the Z30, which is an entry-level vlogger's camera. By all indications, it's a great camera for what it is, but it is 2-year-old tech, although I suspect it's been tweaked slightly to sort of modernize it. But generally speaking, it's 2-year-old tech. It's the same guts as the Z50 and the ZFC. So it's now November 7th. It seems that we're late in the year. It seems that, and I've been predicting this for a while now, but it looks like we won't be getting any FX camera bodies this year at all. Will not be a refresh of Z6 II, Z7 II, or the long-awaited Z8 that's been sort of rumored for some time now that people have been waiting on. And it's been disappointing, I guess, for some people that these cameras aren't coming out when they have all these lenses coming out. There was a need for long lenses. Everybody recognized that at the beginning of the year, but one after the other, they've been bringing out a series of these long lenses, and some people think maybe they should have done some other things. Maybe they're getting too dedicated to this long lens when they are ignoring other things that might be more important. And it does beg the question, why would Nikon do this? Why is Nikon focusing on these long telephoto lenses to the exclusion of other camera bodies and other lenses that have been long awaited? And for example, the 85 1.2 S lens has been long awaited. It's been on the roadmap for well over a year, maybe a year and a half now. And the other brands have brought theirs out. Canon had one out at the launch of the RF, I think, and Sony's had their 85 1.2 out for at least, I'd say, probably a year by now. So some people are wondering where that lens is. Other people are waiting desperately for the 200 to 600 zoom lens and are probably disappointed now that the 600 came out prior to the 200 to 600 and wondering why that would be the case. And they've recently announced a 35 millimeter 1.2 lens they've added to the roadmap recently. All of these lenses would be great lenses to see coming out, and there's a few others too. I won't get into all of them, but it sort of begs the question, like, why did Nikon decide to go all this telephoto route where they blew out the entire pro telephoto line before bringing out other cameras and before bringing out other lenses? So basically, what gives? And I think the answer is actually very, very simple, and we've already mentioned it in this video. In short, it's because of the Z9. Just today, or I think maybe yesterday or today, The Ordinary Filmmaker actually posted a video where he talks about the best-selling cameras of the month. And it might be to your surprise, or maybe not, that the Z9 is the #1 best-selling camera on this last chart. Beat out all the Sonys, all the Canons, the A1, the A7 IV, the Canon R5, all of it. Z9 is the top-selling camera. Some people will say that that's because they were unavailable and they've become available recently, so all the back orders are being filled. And there's definitely some logic and some truth to that position, but it doesn't change the fact that this camera was selling extremely well and that there's tons of buyers for it. And this is no doubt something that Nikon themselves must have predicted. They knew they were putting out a camera that would blow the market away, which it did. It's definitely top of class. And they put it out for a full $1,000 less than the Sony A1, which is the closest competitor. And in pretty much in all relevant ways, it beats the Sony A1, with the exception of maybe very, very specific tracking autofocus scenarios that are very specific, and The Z9 is actually, if it's not as good, it's like 98% of the way there anyway, but in all other ways, it beats the A1 and it's $1,000 less. So Nikon knew this would be a top-selling camera among the pros. And it was, and it is. And we know that definitively by the charts that we see today, or this month. So how does this relate to the lens releases? Why did they release 5 S-line telephoto lenses in a row and to the exclusion of other lenses? And again, I think the answer is the Z9. And what I mean by that is the Z9, although I think people look at the Z9 as this extremely capable all-arounder camera, and it is. It came out, no one really was expecting it to be 45 megapixels at that time. They thought it would be more akin to the older, the D5, D6 class of cameras, the 1DX class of cameras. These are 20 to 24 megapixel cameras. And it came out with a 45 megapixel sensor to match like a D850. And it seems like this is a camera that can do just about everything. And people think of it that way, and I think that's another reason why they've maybe lost sight of what I'm saying here. But first and foremost, and I think this is really important to understand, first and foremost, the Z9 is a sports action wildlife photographer's camera for professional use. That's its first love, if you will. It can shoot anything, I understand that, but at its core, it's designed to be that. It's designed to be for professional use and for fast action, to be a tracking machine. And we know that it's got a 20 frames per second 14-bit raw rate of shooting, which is not dumbed down. I believe the A1 has a 30 frames per second frame rate in RAW, but it's a 12-bit file. Nikon decided not to do that. They wanted the full 14-bit color depth, and they gave it to us with 20 frames per second. For those who need faster shooting, there's 120 frame per second, 11 megapixel JPEG mode, which is totally sufficient for sports shooters, for press sports shooters, and that frame rate is insane. And then they also recently just added a 60 frames per second, 19 megapixel DX crop frame rate. So really the camera is designed for fast sports action, wildlife, that sort of thing. And it's also designed for professionals who do that sort of work for a living. So you can't bring out the camera, expect pros to buy it, and not offer the lenses that are needed for their craft. So you put out the Z9, you're expecting these pros to buy it, you priced it so they would, and they did. And now you got to deliver the lenses. You can't be putting out other lenses instead of the lenses that they require specifically for their use case, which is the most common, or maybe not most common, but the most needed use case of the Z9 camera from a professional standpoint. Those that are making money with the camera is the telephoto, the lenses which they've brought out. And it stands to reason that these are the lenses that they brought out. They gave us 5 professional S-line telephoto lenses that, when you figure it out, they are offering anywhere from 100 millimeters all the way up to over 2,500 millimeters reach. And the 2,500 millimeters reach would basically be with the 600 f4 with the built-in TC 1.4 with a 2x teleconverter added and in DX crop. But you can get all the way out to 2,500 plus millimeters. And you can go all the way down to 100 millimeters with the 100 to 400. So the 5 lenses that I mentioned before cover the gambit of just about everything you could possibly ever need in any sports action wildlife scenario whatsoever. So that's really amazing when you think about it. And the Z9's the camera to do that with. So now you have a full system for any type of professional sports action wildlife shooting scenario. And it's totally out, it's totally available on the market. So I know there are some naysayers that have said that, well, they didn't really need to do this because the F-mount existed. These lenses existed on the F-mount, and the FTZ adapter is very competent, and it is. And therefore, for example, why did they bring out the 600 millimeter f4 lens just recently when they could have perhaps brought out the 200 to 600 instead? And those that needed the 600 f4 could have continued to use their F-mount version. And that's an argument, and it's not, in my estimation, the best argument, because there's a significant difference between the new 600 TC version and the old 600. This notion that you can just throw a TC on so you don't really need the built-in one is actually very, very much false for many use cases. So, and Steve Perry talks about this in his video, his recent video, where he talks about this new 600 f4 lens, where basically you have two lenses in one. At the flick of a switch, he can go from his 600 to 840 and back, and like 90% of his shots are in the 600 to 800 range. So now he's got one lens to rule it all. If he was using his old 600 f4 with a TC that he has to take on and off, he's got to stop shooting, take the lens off, put the TC on, put the lens back on with the TC. By then the shot's totally gone. So this is actually a game-changing lens, and the old 600 doesn't compete with it for use case at all, like at all. And for IQ, evidently the new one has a better image quality than the old one as well, but that's probably marginal, and the old one is phenomenal. So the IQ isn't really the point. The IQ is sort of the gravy. The point is the use case for the new lens is much superior to the old. So they're keeping their professionals in mind, and those with these really highly honed use cases where the Z9 is the camera for them. That's the camera they would buy. So now they've provided the camera, and now they've provided the lenses that those shooters need. So it's actually, they've developed the most relevant line of lenses when you think about it for what the camera that had come out. And they've developed that line and finished that line. So they couldn't take their resources away from finishing that project. But now that project is finished, so this begs the question, what is to come? What can we expect next year? And I think I think it's pretty clear that we're going to see a Z6 III next year, probably something like a Z8, this rumored Z8 is probably going to come, and maybe even a Z90, which is basically this long hoped for D500 replacement. And maybe it won't be all three of those, maybe it will be two of them. It depends on the resources they have to put things out, but I suspect 2 or 3 of those cameras will come out. And I also think those cameras are going to surprise everybody in the same way that Z9 did. It seems like Nikon is going back to their roots a little bit, which is something I'm very glad to see, of being sort of the state-of-the-art company, the best in class. It's a Nikon. The brand meant something. Back in the day, the brand was the exceptional brand, and many shooters today don't even remember that time when Nikon was clearly superior to Canon and other companies. Today, that's changed, and they're all excellent today. I've said this before on my videos, like all of these camera systems are awesome, so you're not going to go wrong with any of them. But Nikon has this niche sort of role where they have a chance, I think, now to really step up and once again sort of dominate, not the market. They'll never dominate all the sales. Like I don't see Nikon ever being number 1 for sure, and probably not number 2 either. They'll probably always be a 3rd place, but that's fine for their market cap. Like they can have a nice market segment in 3rd place, but their gear will be the best of the best. It will literally be the best of the best, and we already see that. Z9 setting the stage for that. These new telephoto lenses are outstanding and dominate the other releases of the other companies so far. There's nothing that can compete for the price and for the IQ with the 800 PF, for example. That's just mind-blowing that that's a $6,500 lens, and their TC, both the 400 and the 600 TC incorporated lenses are class leading, obviously, there's no doubt about it, and they're expensive, but they're class leading. The Z9's class leading. I think we don't see a Z6 III yet, or the Z8, or the Z90, because I think they're doing the same thing with those cameras. I think when those cameras come out, they're going to surprise us. They're not going to just be like the iteration that we expect them to be. They're going to be profound and sort of a solid like jump up in what they offer in ways that I can't even predict, because there's probably, Nikon might have ideas up their sleeve that we don't even know about. But I think that's their intention. I think their intention is to release slower, at least a little bit slower, but to release high quality. So I think next year if we see a Z6 III, I think we'll, or start with the Z8. If we see a Z8, I think we'll see the 85-1.2 drop at the same time. That camera, although it will also be an all-rounder of sorts, I think, it won't have the frame rates of the Z9, clearly shouldn't, probably be higher megapixel, and definitely a studio person's, like a portrait, potentially event, but certainly portraiture and studio commercial work. So the 85mm 1.2 is a lens that makes sense to drop with that. A Z6 III comes out. It's gonna, if it follows in the tradition of the Z6 line, it should be an exceptionally good video camera. And I would imagine a 35 1.2 coming out with that camera, because a 35 1.2 that doesn't focus breathe would be an amazing video camera as well as still camera, or excuse me, amazing video lens as well as a still lens. But it would pair very nicely with that kind of a release. And likewise, the 200 to 600 that everybody's been wanting and people are upset it hasn't come out, that lens is really much more, it's a consumer lens, it's more geared towards the D500 crowd. So it stands to reason that if a Z90 comes out, the 200 to 600 would drop with it, because they sold more 200 to 500 lenses with the D500 than I think than they did for any other reason, even though the 200 to 500 was an FX lens and the D500 was a DX body. You got the extra reach of the DX, and that lens was what that market segment could afford. And I think that'll be the same for a Z90 and a 200 to 600. So basically, it seems to me that they've been really, like, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but it actually makes a lot of sense in that context that the Z9 came out for the bulk of the people who would buy it for their use case. They brought out all the lenses that would solve generally those people's use cases. And now when they move on to these next cameras, they'll bring out these other lenses that will pair better with these newer cameras for their respective use cases. So I think all that makes sense. And I think with that in mind, 2023 should be a pretty epic year for Nikon, because once we have a Z6 III in the lineup, a Z8 in the lineup, the Z9 in the lineup, we have this full range of telephotos, we have a full range of 1.2 lenses, or at least the beginning of a full range, the three basics, the 35, 50, and 85. And I'm sure they're going to bring out some more surprise lenses that are fast. You have a system that's really second to none. And once these autofocus issues are settled once and for all, and I think they're 98% of the way there, I can't think of another like distinct category where Nikon is short of Canon or Sony. And if you disagree with me, that's totally cool. I don't mind disagreement. I actually like it. Again, this is photography discourse. We're here to talk about it and think about it and discuss it. And I welcome any dissenting opinions, and most importantly, give me the logic behind the dissension, not just your opinion, but why you feel a certain way. That's great. I don't care if people agree or not, but my feeling is that Nikon is definitely poised, if they can continue to bring out products of the caliber of the Z9 and the caliber of these recent telephoto lenses. There's no reason why, there's no way in which anyone could say that the Nikons aren't top of class and top of the game. And is at least at the same level as the others, if not above. I believe above. I have reasons for that. That could be a different video, but it doesn't matter. As I said before, they're all excellent if you're a good photographer. If you're just a photographer at all, you should be able to use any of these systems and do very, very well. And it comes down to composition and technique more than it does to the gear at this point. So anyway, if you enjoy this kind of content and agree or disagree with me, I welcome you to like and subscribe. We can continue the discourse as we go forward in time here. Also, please share this video with others, especially naysayers that may disagree with whatever I said. I'd love for them to see the video and have their opinions on things as well. And with that said, I'm going to call that a video. Thank you very much for watching Photography Discourse. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your comments and your opinions as well. Peace. See you later.